This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battlerite Sage. Hey, guess what? It's patch day, my dudes! And you know what? I think this is going to be one of the biggest shakeups of the meta that we've seen in a while. Over half of the champion roster are receiving changes, and some of those changes are significant. This isn't the SLS light touch approach we've been used to over the last few months. But before we get into the champion updates, I need to mention the Pro League chests that we'll have access to on Friday. These chests contain some pretty crazy looking skins. They're a bit out there and they won't be for everyone, but personally I think they look awesome. There are at least 3 ways that you can get hold of one of these chests. You can participate in the Rising Stars tournament, which is kind of like BPL's little brother that anyone can enter. The second way you can get it is by predicting the winners of BPL games. And finally, you can just purchase them through Twitch for $4.99. It's unclear how many chests you'll get for that $4.99, but it also includes a Twitch crate in that price. So the focus of these chests is clearly on supporting and raising interest in Battlerite's tournament scene, which I think is a great thing. This game was pretty much made to be played competitively. And I'm going to make another video about the BPL crates and the tournament scene in general soon, because there's a lot to talk about. Now let's move on to the champion updates. As I said, over half of the champion roster have received changes in this patch. And some of these changes are huge. So I'm going to try and summarize it as fast as possible so this video doesn't last for 10 years. The script is 7 pages long, so it's a lot of stuff, guys. First, let's talk about the support meta. Since the free-to-play launch, we've pretty much always had one dominant support. First, it was Poloma. She got nerfed and Lucy had her very brief moment in the sun. That spotlight was quickly snatched away with the release of Zander, and Zander remained the alpha support all the way up to Ulric's release, and, well, we all know how dominant Ulric has been both in tournament play and solo queue recently. Well, today we get a big shakeup of the support meta. Zander is getting absolutely nailed into the ground. His spotlight healing is being reduced by 25%. Sheep Trick has had its cooldown increased by a second and the impact delay has been increased by 0.1 second. That means he'll have it less often and you'll get an extra split second to get out of the AoE before being turned into a sheep. His Heart Restoration Battlerite has had its heal over time reduced by 1/3. His Showdown Battlerite now gives a slightly smaller shield. His Stacked Deck Battlerite now only gives his Illusion an extra card. And finally, his Portal has received a bit of a rework. The max distance that you can cast it has been reduced, and the iframe duration has been somewhat normalized. On top of that, after exiting the portal, you now have a 0.1 second delay before you can do anything. So big nerfs for Zander. Is it too much? I don't know. He still offers a hell of a lot to his team, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. On to the next problem support, Ulric. Where to start? So, his max health has actually been reduced from 240 to 230. His space and EX space now heal 9 instead of 12. The regular space has also had its post-wait time increased slightly, and the EX space actually has a post-wait time now. So before, Ulric could EX space in and hit you with his hammer stun with absolutely no delay. So EX space now has a 0.1 second post-wait time. This gives you a little bit of extra time to react before you get smacked in the face. The favor buff has had its bonus healing factor reduced slightly, and the visual effect has been toned down, thank God. In terms of Battlerites, all of his most popular Battlerites have been nerfed. Cleave no longer does bonus area damage, Devotion now only grants extra healing to his allies and not himself, Divine Protection has been completely reworked into a shield instead of flat damage reduction, and it only applies to allies, not Ulric himself. Penitence reduces enemy healing by 25% instead of 33%, and Vindicator now reduces his space cooldown by 4 seconds instead of a flat reset. Whew! So that's a big nerf to Ulric across the board. There are 2 supports, however, who have received some love in this patch. Blossom's Tree now has 25% more health, her E has had its cooldown reduced by a second, and her Kind-Hearted Battlerite has had its bonus healing increased from 2 to 4. A bunch of her other Battlerites have received buffs, but they're all rights with very low pick rates. Go check out the patch notes in the description if you'd like to have a look. My favourite support, Poloma, has also received some love. Her EXQ has had its damage reduced by 5, but the healing it gives to Poloma has been increased by the same amount. So in a 1v1 it still gives the same health swing as it did before, but it provides Poloma with a little more self-sustain while trading off some guaranteed easy damage. Her R ability, Pixie, has had its cooldown reduced from 20 seconds to 15 seconds. This is a huge buff to Poloma's burst healing and damage output. And finally, her Shimmering Bond and Direwolf Battlerites have received slight buffs. They're not the most frequently used Battlerites, but they're a little more used than some of the other changes in this patch. Now let's move on from supports. Some of the counters and counter-like abilities have had their cooldowns put in line with all the other counters. Almost all counter-like abilities in this game have an 8-second cooldown. The exceptions to this were Destiny, Rygon, and Sirius, who all had 9-second cooldowns. In this patch, Destiny's counter has had its cooldown reduced to 8 seconds, and Rygon's parry has been reduced to 8 seconds. But for some reason, Sirius is having his counter cooldown left at 9 seconds. I'm not sure if this is an oversight or a deliberate balance decision. But for now, every counter-like ability has an 8-second cooldown except for Sirius. And while we're on the topic of Rygon and his parry, the melee meta is also receiving a big shakeup. Freya in particular is being hit hard by the nerf bat in this patch. The final strike on her Mouse 1 combo has been reduced, the haste factor on her space and EX space has been reduced, almost all of her most used Battlerites have been nerfed, so the shields from Electric Conduction and Lightning Rod have been reduced, the haste factor and duration has been reduced on Tempest, Rolling Thunder has had its range reduced, however, her Mouse 2 has had its damage increased to 12, and her Thunderbolt Battlerite has had its bonus damage increased from 8 to 12. It's not a commonly picked Battlerite right now, but it's a pretty significant buff, so maybe it'll be worth taking. So Freya is losing out a lot on haste, melee damage, and shields, but she's gaining a little bit in the way of ranged poke. It's definitely a nerf overall though, and a pretty significant one at that. The other melee in the firing line is Shifu. His thrust Battlerite no longer gives you bonus damage per charge, but the base bonus damage has been increased slightly. Essentially what this means is that a 4-stacked right click with thrust will do 32 damage instead of 35 now. Swift Feet was nerfed at the start of Season 1, but it's receiving further nerfs both to its haste duration and haste factor. Bako has also received a nerf to one of his Battlerites. Axe and Shield now reduces the Bulwark cooldown by half a second per swing instead of a full second. It's a pretty significant nerf if you make use of that Battlerite. Now onto the buffed melee champions. Rook. Oh god, Rook is getting some big buffs. His R ability has had its damage reduced significantly. However, his space damage has been increased, his Mouse 2 damage has been increased, and the cooldown of both his Mouse 2 and EX Mouse 2 have been reduced to 7 seconds. So while Rook hasn't seen much tournament play, he was already a force to be reckoned with in solo queue. With these changes, I think we'll be seeing a lot more Rook in this patch, and hopefully we'll see some Rook in tournament play. Rygon is getting more buffs in this patch. As I mentioned, his parry is getting its cooldown reduced, but the counter-attack damage from the parry is also being increased slightly. His R ability, Dragon Palm, has also been buffed. Both the initial hit and the wall impact damage has been increased. Unfortunately, I still don't think this is going to make Rygon viable in tournaments. I think it's just going to be another buff to pub stompers at low ranks. Honestly, I think it's his base kit that needs a bit of a rework. 2 patches in a row he's been pumped full of damage, but the damage output has never really been Rygon's issue. Sure, at some point his damage could get so high that his lack of escapes won't be an issue, but that's not something we really want to push towards. Thorn and Rukan have also received some love in this patch. The damage on Thorn's EX Mouse 2 has been increased by a pretty significant amount, plus the damage and healing on the Thorn's buff has been increased. Rukan's E has had its damage and healing increased, plus the EX version of his E now heals himself as well as his ally. Both of them have also had some buffs to some of their less used Battlerites. Jamila has also received some slight changes. Her EX Mouse 2 has had its cooldown reduced to be in line with the regular Mouse 2 cooldown. Her E and EX Space now ignore the global cooldown, and her ultimate now has a shorter cast time. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to stop it being one of the worst ultimates in the game. Sorry guys. And finally, let's have a look at the range champions. There's actually much less of a shake-up with the range champions, but still some pretty significant changes. Jade has probably received the biggest nerfs. The range on her left clicks has been reduced by about 3%. Not much, but it's still something. The damage on her space has been reduced quite significantly, and the haste duration and haste factor have both been reduced on her EXQ. On top of that, her Gunslinger Battlerite has been nerfed yet again, meaning less cooldown reduction on stealth. Deadly Focus has had its bonus damage reduced slightly, and Delight has had its healing reduced. All of those are top-picked Battlerites, so big nerfs across the board for Jade. And this is something that actually confuses me a bit. Jade wasn't exactly a top pick in tournament play, so I'm not entirely sure what Stunlock's balance strategy is here. Rook is receiving some buffs that were definitely needed for tournament play, but they could make him a bit obnoxious in solo queue. And then on the other hand, Jade has received some nerfs that will probably make her less obnoxious for solo queue, while making her much less viable in tournaments. I think it's just a bit of an inconsistent balance strategy. But anyway, moving on. Esmo has also been nerfed. The base damage on his ultimate has been reduced from 55 to 50. With the Grimoire of Death Battlerite, it will still one-shot the middle orb, but it's supposed to reduce collateral damage on the enemy team, or that's what Stunlock says anyway. The reload time on his Mouse 1 has been increased by about 10%, so a reasonable DPS nerf. On top of that, Wiz has had its haste factor reduced, and Undermine has had its weaken factor reduced. Again, both of these are popular Battlerites with Esmo players, so it should be a noticeable nerf. And finally, Stunlock's favourite little snowflake, Alicia. Alicia has actually been buffed again, and honestly, I'm not really mad about it. Despite being buffed repeatedly, she still hasn't seen a lot of tournament play. So here's what's changed. Her Q, E, and both EX versions have had their cooldowns reduced. Her R ability now inflicts chill on impact as well as when it breaks, and the maximum snare factor on that chill has been increased. And finally, her figure skating Battlerite now applies haste after Ice Block ends, rather than when you cast it, which kinda makes sense. What are you gonna do with haste when you're an Ice Block? What a lot of changes. So, overall thoughts on the patch? Well, I think we'll see a big meta shift, particularly when it comes to melee and support picks. But aside from that, there's a clear trend that Stunlock wants to reduce haste effects almost across the board. The one exception to that is Taya. Her whole kit revolves around being a speed demon, so it kind of makes sense to leave her haste alone. But overall, the game will feel a little bit slower in this patch. Anyway, this is just one person's perspective on the changes, so let me know what you think of the patch notes. Is there anything significant that you think people haven't noticed? Are some of the changes to the less used Battlerites significant enough to make them useful? Let me know in the comments because I'd love to hear some opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battlerite guides, news, and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/battleritesage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/battleritesage. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.